now, and Jennifer Lechner.
Great, thank you, Dr. Sells, and I'm really honored to be here today to talk with you about this topic. I am Jennifer Lechner. I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission. We are a commission of the North Carolina Supreme Court, and we work on policy and resource issues around civil justice matters. I have been in this position since 2008, but I've been working in access to justice and legal aid issues for over 20 years now at this point. So the commission works on lots of different projects. I'm going to give you some highlights about our activities related to housing. We work internally with the Administrative Office of the Courts on policy issues and best practices and identifying needs within the court system to get resources out to folks locally, especially as the eviction and foreclosure moratoria have expired. So you'll see a lot of our work on the AOC website and the guide and file packets and in other materials that are promulgated by the Administrative Office of the Courts. One of the programs of the Equal Access to Justice Commission is the Pro Bono Resource Center, and we've just launched a new partnership with the North Carolina Bar Foundation and NCORE to work on getting landlords and tenants to yes on the landlord-tenant agreement so that we can get rental assistance payments out to those who most need it. So that is a new project that we are launching. We also provide technical assistance to a number of jurisdictions who have questions about implementing diversion programs, rental assistance programs, right to counsel programs. So we do a lot of advising around that. And then finally, we also monitor state and county data, foreclosure and eviction data weekly and monthly, depending on how it comes out from AOC, so that we can identify trends in local jurisdictions. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Next up is Janet McCauley-Blue.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janet McCauley-Blue, and I am the managing attorney of the Greensboro Office of Legal Aid of North Carolina. I'm also the Triad Regional Manager, which includes Winston, Greensboro and Winston for the Triad. Housing Legal Aid is a nonprofit law firm whose mission is to address issues of poverty and remove barriers to economic access, eviction, housing cases, keeping tenants in place is and has always been a huge part of what we do. Even more so as the pandemic, we've all been dealing with the pandemic, and there have been so many evictions there. We have been through the process of trying to keep people housed under the various moratoria, and now we are moving into a phase of trying to still keep people housed and to access all the rental assistance that's available. We have worked on what we consider an eviction resolution rather than diversion. Most of the legal aid programs in the state are called eviction diversion, but we want to actually resolve the eviction cases. We recently acquired funding from United Way that allowed us to bring on board a social worker who we think is very important, and this is going to be key to this work, to follow up with tenants to get to the root causes of what the eviction is and try to resolve the crisis and keep them stabilized in their homes. Recently, we launched, as Magistrate Antonelli alluded to, we started a courthouse clinic, and we're so grateful for the help and cooperation of Judge Vincent and Magistrate Antonelli to make this happen. We're in partnership with UNCG as well, and Renee Norris is also there assisting with mediation. So we have paired services there with legal representation. Tenants are able to apply for our services on the spot, as well as Renee's mediation service, assistance with rental applications, and representatives of the city and county rental assistance programs are there as well, so that we can give an update in real time to the magistrates about any kind of pending rental assistance applications. So very excited about it, and we hope that we can do more. We're only there 1 day a week right now because that's all we can do, but we're very excited about the results so far.
Excited to watch the growth of that, that resource, definitely. Renee.
Hi, I'm Renee Norris. I'm the Eviction Mediation Program Coordinator here at UNCG Center for Housing Community Studies. I just started in August. Prior to that, I had 7 years at the Greensboro Housing Coalition. And before that, I was a solo practitioner in Maryland, Pennsylvania. And that's where I really grew to experience mediation and the difference that it can make in avoiding evictions and court rulings that will create a stain on someone's reputation forever, and find it very difficult to move forward and find new housing that's affordable, that's safe. Whereas if you have this eviction on your record, you may take whatever you can get and you may end up in the worst kind of situations. And I'm really, really so glad to be part of this new program in the clinic with legal aid, that we're only there 1 day a week, but I have seen the difference that we can make by being there and helping people to apply for emergency rental assistance, even when we're not in court. But it's a great program.
Thank you, Renee. Holly.
Good afternoon. My name is Holly Owner. I am a lawyer with legal aid in the Greensboro office. I have recently taken on a new position to supervise tenant eviction work, defense work for legal aid in sort of surrounding rural counties in the Triad. Legal aid in partnership with NCORE recognized that tenants in rural areas were having trouble getting access to the HOPE money. And so we have started this project to expand our services to 88 counties in the state. I supervise to cover 12 counties, which include, but are not limited to, Rockingham, Rowan, Randolph, Surrey, Stokes, Iredell, Anson, Montgomery, etc. And so we're really excited to launch this program. We are getting, we are expanding the number of lawyers we have to represent tenants in court in those places. We are going to be expanding sort of courtroom workers, people who will try to kind of replicate what we're doing here in Greensboro as far as providing on-the-spot services for tenants who are in court, to try to link them with HOPE funds, to try to bring landlords and tenants together to resolve issues on the spot in court. If I understand a lot of people have mentioned this, but if I can just again re-emphasize how successful the past 5 weeks of the court clinic in Greensboro have been. This isn't an exact number, but looking through at least the first 4 weeks that we've done the clinic, where we only were there 1 day a week, I calculated, I think only 2% of tenants who showed up to court were evicted. And of those, most of them we were able to assist with an appeal. We recognized there was this incredible gap between people who had gotten behind on their rent, mostly because of the financial impact that COVID had on them and their family, who had applied for rental assistance, but were still being evicted. And this project has done an incredible job to sort of close that gap and provide services to tenants, provide housing stability I'm also really excited about it, and I'm excited to try to expand this type of model across the state.
Thank you so much, Holly. So you can see from our panel, we've got local, regional, statewide expertise in a variety of ways of approaching eviction and housing stability. Our first question, as the economy emerges from the devastation of the pandemic, we find that many people are behind on rent, behind on their mortgages, and facing housing precarity. From your vantage, local, regional, statewide, how big of an issue is this? We were expecting a tsunami, a waterfall, a cliff of cases, and yet we're seeing an uptick, a growing number of eviction cases in court, but nothing quite like the foreboding crisis that had been alluded to in the press and by many others. What, from your vantage, is going on? And this is open to any of the panelists.
I think one of the things that may have made a difference is how much money actually got out to people when the emergency rental assistance program first started. You know, I think some of the cases we see now are because of all the people that had applied are now at the recertification part, or are slowed down the money getting out the door because of sheer numbers. But I think that sort of delayed some of the tsunami that we were expecting. So a lot of people, you know, actually have heard about the program, got it. So landlords, and I will say this also, I think landlords know the program's there, and some of them are very receptive to telling their clients about the program. And, you know, I get calls from people that said, my landlord told me to call you so that you can help me apply for rent or utility assistance, and so they can avoid having to file for eviction. That's one of my view.
And this is Michelle. I think Renee's right. You know, in 7 months, the city of Greensboro and organizational partners put $13.4 million back into this city for emergency rental and utility assistance. And so that really, you know, slowed the flow of the crisis point. I think without that, we would have been looking at some of those numbers that we anticipated. We recently got an additional $10 million from Guilford County that will allow us to close out the remaining little bit more than 1,300 people in the city of Greensboro who are waiting for that assistance. So essentially, in a 7-month period of time, 4,000 households were supported and really propped up to keep them from flooding into, you know, the numbers of people who had lost their housing as part of the economic impacts of COVID. So I think Renee's spot on. Renee, you just said it all, and now everybody's like, I don't have anything to add. That's pretty much what happened.
Well,
I was just going to add one thing, which is I think that from what we have been able to determine as a result of our local eviction diversion network partners is that we have been seeing a lot of people who have kind of been self-screening themselves out, meaning that they might not even, they just determine on their own for whatever reason that they're not eligible for ERAP funding. And then there are some also who are just trying to maintain and they don't want to make waves, and they think that somehow by applying for ERAP funding that's going to create a precarious position for them in terms of their tenancies. And so I think that we're seeing some influences and some nuances with those areas as well, unfortunately.
I think that's true, but I think, you know, in reality, I think you're right. There's often stigma that's associated with federal assistance programs, at least in the minds of some folks. But in reality, if you're living in this country, you're benefiting from some type of federal assistance already, most likely. So if we could reduce the stigma that's kind of associated with the need for support in moments like these, that goes a long way to getting folks the help they need before it's gotten to an even larger issue, before it snowballs into something bigger, if we can stop it on the front end. And I think that comes down to really, a lot of folks on this call and others communicating with the community and being really intentional about getting that message out there and what it means to have programs like this in place when we experience something that none of us have ever seen in our lifetimes, right? So I think that's important.
We've seen this in the people that we've talked to at the courthouse and other clients that we see, but there are people who they just really don't think that they will qualify, and there are landlords who have a very not a very good understanding of what the program is, and don't understand that if their tenant has been approved, they're pretty much going to be made whole. And once they understand that, I think Renee can probably speak to that, because I know she did one mediation where the landlord just really didn't understand the program.
Yeah, that was one that it was sort of funny afterwards to hear from you and Holly talk about what happened in the court, and then my experiences with the landlord and the tenant in mediation, is that he really was concerned about all the rules that were involved with HOPE program. And it was, so I had to explain the program of ERAP. And I even, to make sure he knew it wasn't just me talking, showed him it on the in the computer at my laptop, so I could show him, okay, here you go. These are the things, all you have to provide is a W-9, so that when you can be paid for this. And he was like, okay, I've got partners and this has been going on. And, and I think it really helped, we talk about mediation, is that the part that people can actually talk to each other and it's not adversarial, and speaking to the landlord and tenant, they could hear each other's story and understand what was going on. And then by reaching out to the city and county where the applications are for these funds, to expedite it. And the landlord was willing to say, you know what, no, I'm not going to proceed with the eviction now. I'm going to give time for this ERAP to move forward. And so she was able to stay in her home. She got approved. He's already gotten the letter sooner than we had agreed to during mediation.
I think that one of the things too that is important for folks to remember is that as ERAP funding was made available, there was a simultaneous, really heavy charge to get it into the community as quickly as possible. So it's not like this is a program that had, a year of community outreach and public information time so that folks really were prepared and well informed, to the point about, landlords not really understanding what went into it and everything like that. And I think, Renee, the point you make about mediation, I think is really true in most of the work we do in this lens, which is when we humanize it and when people are given an opportunity to be more than just a statistic, right? And their stories are able to be heard, and we center the lived experience of the people who are most impacted, we see that better outcomes are possible. And that's a really key part of the mediation process, I think, for everybody that's involved in it.
That's actually one of the things I was thinking. When you talk about, where is the avalanche? Why is it not hit? I feel like I'm living it. So, I mean, look, I'm not a person who's a policy maker at the top. I don't crunch numbers. I don't know what the numbers say, and maybe they look low, but every day in the courtroom, I know Janet and Renee and Magistrate Antonelli can all also attest to this. There are 100 eviction cases on the docket in Greensboro alone, 4 days a week, where people are routinely getting evicted. And so for each of those people, the avalanche is here. They are rendered homeless. They have 10 days before a writ of possession is coming, and 7 days until a sheriff is at their door. I don't know anyone with all the money in the world who can make a move happen in 17 days let alone people who don't have the resources and don't have the money and have small children. It's an eviction for one family is devastating. And this is happening times 100, times 4 in one city in our state. So it feels to me like the avalanche is here. I think things are only going to get worse. And I think we need to be doing everything we can to act now and act fast and intervene.
I completely agree with that. I think, though, it's really interesting to look back a decade back, I'll say. Stephen, I know that you will recall this. Conversations about eviction mediation were happening in this community 10 years ago, and we couldn't get it off the ground. Imagine if we had been able to do that then, many of the folks that we're seeing today would be at completely different places in this process. And so it's impacted by the delayed innovation, right? Like the pushback for really innovating a decade ago when we knew we needed it then. And in some ways, and I mean this in the best possible way, but the pandemic has been a catalyst for some changes that we've known for decades that we needed in this community. And Holly, totally agreed. I know for all of you, 30-second dance party. Who's in? Holly, for y'all that are in the middle of eviction mediation, and for staff that are working on ERAP, you're drinking from a fire hose. Like, there's no question that that's the case. But the beautiful thing to me is we're laying a foundation to prevent this from ever being at this level again. The things we do now will lay a foundation to stabilize this situation moving forward. And we're building infrastructure to create a better down the road. I know that doesn't happen in this moment while everybody's drowning in this. If you'd ever told me that we were going to drop $13.4 million in 7 months into rental assistance in Greensboro, I don't think anybody on this call would have ever seen that coming. And so, you know, it's this really weird paradox, right? We're innovating in ways we never have before as a community, driven by this pandemic. But from a workload standpoint, everyone is literally buried trying to keep these families and these folks afloat while they're going through the most difficult times of their lives, many of them.
Well, I agree with all of that, probably about 110%. And it certainly doesn't seem like there's no tsunami when you're over at the courthouse. I think a lot of that is that there's a huge backlog, and Magistrate Antonelli might want to address that, but there's a huge backlog of evictions, and there are landlords who couldn't file during the moratorium. So, you know, you're seeing a lot of people and a lot of landlords. You know, there are great landlords. They're absolutely great landlords who are over there, and landlords attorneys who understand the process and are willing to wait for payment. But there are others who aren't so willing, and they're just frustrated with the system. And what we need to do now is to slow this whole, you know, we've got this flood, and so we're trying to slow this down for the rental assistance to come through and for people to get stabilized.
Just from a different perspective, it is not, there's not an avalanche. This has been a slow leak for a very long time. And as much as I hate to say it, the pandemic is probably one of the best things that has happened to the housing, because it has finally brought the housing issue into light. This has been an issue much longer than the pandemic has been around. And it is just now coming to the forefront where people think, oh my gosh, there's evictions. Because of the pandemic, the courts are limiting the number of eviction cases that we can hear each session. And we do that so that we can still maintain social distancing for everyone and keep everyone safe and healthy. So that means that we are limited. We just increased the limit, but we're limited to 40 cases per session. And we have 3 sessions of small claims court every every day, Monday through Thursday. So that's up to 120 cases, as Holly spoke about. Some of those may be money owed, but the majority of the cases are eviction. Prior to the pandemic, it would not be unusual for one session of small claims. And remember, there's 2 other sessions that happen, for one session to have 120 cases. It was absolutely not unheard of. The most that I have personally had was 392, and that was in one session. And I have a picture of all of my docket to prove because most people would not believe it. So again, this is not a new thing. The pandemic has probably controlled the avalanche for us so that we're able to address each case more fully. But this has been something that's been going on for a long time. So I'm grateful to see the interest and involvement of people that can help prevent it from continuing.
And I just wanted to pick up on something that Magistrate Antonelli and Michelle said about, if you've been around me long enough, I'll say never let a crisis go to waste. And this has been a terrible crisis and hurt, tens of thousands of families, especially around evictions and other housing instability issues. But if we have to have a silver lining out of this, it is that communities like yours are coming together. And I just want to commend you for doing that, because I know your hair is on fire and it's hard to think about planning and building a better system while your hair is on fire and you're dealing with the crisis in front of you. But we are seeing in jurisdictions all across the state where it has taken this crisis and the impending doom of the avalanche of eviction and then foreclosure cases to really make some changes that, as Michelle's pointed out, we've known have been needed for well over a decade. And so, this is a terrific opportunity for us to reimagine how we are doing things around evictions and hopefully to leverage the federal dollars that are available to be able to implement some of those changes. And so I am excited to see what is happening in Guilford County, what's happening in Buncombe, what's happening in Durham, what's happening in Wake, and other jurisdictions across the state that we're finally making some progress around eviction policy.
One thing that I know from data that Jennifer has shared is that over the course of the last 4 months, we've seen an exponential increase. We're not yet back to the numbers that we saw in 2016 at the peak of the eviction crisis that Magistrate Antonelli was probably referring to when we had 300 cases at one time. In Guilford County, we had 16,000 summary ejectments that year. The year before the pandemic, we were down to 11,000. So we were coming down. We're just back at that level again. Are there communities that are disproportionately impacted by this crisis? Who is being disproportionately displaced? Who is not getting assistance? How can we do better to reach out to those folks?
Well, Dr. Sills, according to our local folks in the field, the grassroots organizers, as well as those with other organizations, it has been pretty clear that racial minority populations have been disproportionately impacted by the virus and by the eviction rate. Basically, we already knew that there were challenges in terms of minorities in general having secure and affordable housing. And definitely the pandemic has done nothing but exacerbate that issue. And so it's definitely disproportionately impacting particularly African Americans and Hispanics here in Forsyth County and Winston-Salem. What can be done about it is that's the $64,000 question. Because people have worked, definitely has already been noted, we've been working at record levels and at new levels in terms of collaboration and trying to make sure that we are providing resources and support to one another. And when we're talking about entities like Forsyth County Government, City of Winston-Salem, Legal Aid, Wake Forest School of Law, and so on, when we're talking about all of these different groups coming together and trying to put our heads together, and brainstorm on some comprehensive life skill related resources that we can provide in addition to ERAP assistance and so forth, then that is really unprecedented, because of course we know that there are so many people and organizations who are trying to confront and somewhat alleviate the eviction problem that has been ongoing for many years, as has already been said. But right now, yes, that is one thing that has come out of this, is people are coming together and trying to combine resources to figure out a way to address this head on. But yes, that's what we're seeing here locally in Winston-Salem.
I think from a Greensboro standpoint, certainly the same is true, right? Like, this is really shining a light on the racial inequity that has permeated our society for as long as it's existed. I think we're taking this opportunity to take a look at things and not just talk about them anymore, but actually try to start advancing initiatives like land trusts and land banking. And how do we restructure those things to get property back into the hands of, or, you know, get rental options or purchase options back into the hands of impacted communities. And the reality of it is, again, like, and I'll probably keep saying this, if there's anything positive, the point that was made earlier as it relates to COVID, it's that it forced us to address things that have existed for so long. We put so many band-aids on things for years and years and decades leading into this. And now we're actually having to do the hard work of the systems change that's been really required for a long time to address these needs. But when you look at things like, how do we use a receivership program to get property back into impacted communities so that there are rental options that are affordable? How do we make sure that we keep that 0 to 30% AMI as a serious portion of our housing development, right? Like, the city council established a goal to have 1,000 new units at the lower income levels of AMI back online by 2022. That's a heavy lift, but it's a necessary lift, and that's necessary work to get us through this, because the problem is just going to continue. COVID is shining a big light on it, but it's always existed and it will always exist until we realize that we need to have new solutions instead of having the same conversations that we've been having for decades that haven't really resulted in the entrenched changes that we need.
And I just want to mention one thing too, is that people that are getting help now with the emergency rental assistance funds, they're telling me how their leases have come to an end and their new apartment rent is going up 20, 25%. So, you know, it's great that the program's here, but they're wondering, what am I going to do? You know, I have a job. You know, I didn't have it for a while due to COVID. I now have a job. That's gonna take even more of my income just to be able to stay in the same place that I currently am in. And it's, you know, and then landlords are deciding they don't want to be part of the Section 8, you know. So many things are happening that we're helping now, but yes, like Michelle was saying, there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Right, like rental assistance is one piece, and it's an incredible piece, and it's helped so many people and will continue to help so many people. But there are so many other issues that have existed for years and years and years. There's been a housing crisis in our country and in our city specifically way before the pandemic started. And so there's all these other ancillary issues like conditions in people's homes. I mean, people are living, a family I'm helping right now, living without heat with small children, and they're paying their rent every month. And, you know, there are these other, there's a lack of quality affordable housing. So great that we can catch them up on their rent, but for what? For a place that's infested with rats or roaches or doesn't have heat? I mean, that's another issue that we're tackling. If I can just very briefly tell a quick anecdote about another client that was in my office just this morning, I think it really highlights sort of some of the systemic failures, and kind of what Wanda was talking about is these sort of institutions that are in place that have that are bittersweet. They help people, but they also continue to prevent people from sort of breaking out of the system. So she had been living in her house for 6 years. She loved it there. She paid her rent diligently every month. And just in March, she got permission from her landlord to start doing some of her own kind of small renovations. She painted the whole house. She installed a brand new ceiling fan, and she was really proud of what she was doing in the house. She lived there with her 2 adult daughters. Just 2 months later, the ownership changed and they decided they no longer wanted to rent to her. So just after she had poured a ton of money that she had saved to like make this house her home, she was told that she had a month to be out. She was afraid of being evicted. She had a Section 8 voucher that she didn't want to lose. And so in 1 month, she and her daughters cleared out of this house and started living out of their car. They were living out of their car for a month until I sort of finally became aware of that and was able to get her temporary extended stay hotel assistance through Salvation Army. She's now been there for, I think, 4 months. And this morning she was in my office to tell me that her Section 8 voucher is for $800 for a 3-bedroom. She's been looking for 4 months and can't find anything that fits that description. They have also told her that she will have to kick out one of her 19-year-old daughter who's currently in college and working at McDonald's because that daughter's income is too high for her to be able to use her Section 8 voucher. My client receives disability because she has back and leg problems, but despite that, she's been trying to work through the pain to make additional money and is now at risk of losing her Social Security disability because she's trying to work through to get a little bit more money. And so she's sitting in my office just this morning, 2 hours ago, crying because she feels like she is getting nowhere. There's all this supposed help that doesn't feel like help, and she feels lost. And I know I'm not probably saying anything that anybody doesn't already know, but it was like a tangible example of a person and a family who I don't know what to tell her. I mean, stop working so that you can get Section 8 to pay for a place. Keep working and risk losing your disability. I don't know. I mean, and now she has until the 27th to find a place to live, or else she'll be back to living in the car. So something has to change. The systems we have in place now to help people are sort of built out of a place of oppression of poor people of color. That is how they operate. They continue to operate that way. And it will require a complete upheaval of some of those systems before we get anywhere.
And hi, this is Sherry Neal, the Continuing Care Program Manager for Guilford County. And Holly, your story resonates, of course, all the time. And when I look at the situations when we're working with children and family and child welfare and age and adult services, we see these kind of stories on a regular basis. And so here's one of the issues that again resonates with. We have institutions that have to change. We have to change. Systematic changes have to occur for situations for that client to change, because the systems set it up that people can only do but so much. And we all understand $800 is not going to get anyone a decent place to stay, honestly, not in this day and time. And so it's unfortunate that people do have to do just that, make choices of whether or not I'm going to stop working because I need to have somewhere to live. But then you also have the issue about, that's why people have to make a choice whether or not they're going to get their medication, or they're going to buy food for their family, or if they have a car to drive. They have to make these choices because our systems are set up to not enhance and help people to move to independence. Even though we talk about to move to independence, we're not set up to really do that. And so we really have to go on that federal level to really make those kind of systematic changes so they can come down from the state to the local, because all we do is we're just basically following the rules and the laws that happen at the federal level. And so unless we start moving some of those changes there and start pushing here locally to say, hey, we have to hold people accountable and say, hey, we can only, you don't have anywhere for them to live. And then the other issues, we don't have housing for people. So we have people, I've had 10 calls this week. I don't know where we're gonna place it. We have no housing opportunities for people. We're talking about 10 people, from single adults to families, people with young children, people just getting out of the hospital and trying to jump through hoops. I have called every shelter this week to place someone in or a family in, and we still cannot find stable housing. So ditto to Holly, what you just said, because we have to come together as a community to figure out some plans about how we're going to address this ongoing issue. And I agree, the ERA money is great, but what are we going to do for sustainability? And so, and then we have these agencies working on the ground that have capacity issues on top of that. So they need more resources to help the individuals. And then we need more housing options.
Well, I mean, totally agreed, right? Like all of that is 100% true. And you know, we're looking at things, people make these choices every day, right? But it's more than just talking about the housing. If we're going to do these things, then we've got to address the systems pieces that you all are talking about. We've also got to look at things like the economic conditions in our community and start reining in folks who have the ability to impact the economic conditions in our community into these conversations, because this is a critical piece of it, right? When we look at the unaffordability of most of the housing stock that we have, we know that our local wages don't comply with people being able to afford that, even if it's not anyone that's receiving any type of assistance. And then the other piece as it relates to that is I agree that much of this is mandated by the federal level in terms of some of the restrictions that are in place, but there are things at a local level that we can do if we choose to be less restrictive than some of the things that are just piled onto us from the federal level. Some of the restrictions, for example, as it relates to housing authority requirements, can be less restrictive for people who are formerly incarcerated, for example, and being banned long-term from being able to access affordable units that way. But you've got to layer in things like communities of color that are disproportionately impacted are also disproportionately impacted when you talk about things like incarceration, when you talk about things like low wages, when you talk about all those things. We've got to have every sector at the table talking about the ways that they can innovate, because all of these things impact our ability to get folks into housing. The scenario where you're talking about someone that's got a college age kid who's going to school and also working, right? Like there's a reason that family's having to do that. It's the only way that they're able to keep their head above water. But if you want to break that multi-generational cycle and let that kid be able to get through the process of achieving that college degree, moving on to better economic opportunities, we've got to put things into, available to that family to make it happen. But we see, historically, and I'll go back to my time at the IRC, tons and tons and tons of people whose former incarceration status dramatically impacts them in all of these ways, right? And we as a community are sending back vouchers on an annual basis because we don't have the housing units that support the rental rate that we need to be able to use them. It is appalling to me that a community would ever leave vouchers on the table and know that those vouchers represent human beings that we couldn't make it work for. So until we focus on that lower income level for developers, for other folks, and we look at innovative ways to get the housing off the ground, we're going to continue to send back vouchers, right? And when you talk about the shelter system, even in the best of times, our shelter system is so overburdened that we don't even begin to have enough beds to accommodate anybody, and B, and I'm apologizing in advance for the soapbox. So, and B, we don't need to be talking about shelters. We need to be talking about permanent housing. Shelters are a Band-Aid on a severed artery. It is a temporary solution to a long-term problem. We need to absolutely support the shelters we have in place. But frankly, I'm not interested in talking about more shelter beds. I'm interested in talking about more affordable housing options that are made available. And one of the things that we're doing at in neighborhood development, it was just passed through City Council in the last couple of weeks. We just got the approval to purchase the Regency Inn, which is in District 2. It is in an area that desperately needs some economic impact. Oh, wow. There will be a motel conversion for 74 units of permanent supportive housing for people with the highest acuity who are transitioning out of homelessness. And the question may become, well, why are we talking about that when we're talking about emergency rental assistance? And these things are connected, right? When you raise the floor, you raise the ceiling. When you address the needs of the people that are taking the highest toll on our servers from a financial and a staffing perspective, and you address those needs first, that opens up more resources to be made available for people with less high acuity who really need less to get back on their feet than some of the more kind of entrenched issues that are present for other folks. So that's my short-term soapbox for this moment. I'm sure there'll be more.
I'd like to pivot, picking up on structural changes and in particular policy changes, but pivoting back to evictions in the courts. We recently conducted a legal needs assessment in partnership with the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission that found that only 1% of cases for eviction had representation, had assistance from legal aid and other service providers. Is there a possibility at the local level, at the state level, at some kind of level for right to counsel or some similar mechanism that says everybody gets legal representation in the case of eviction? I guess this is for Magistrate Antonelli and Jennifer Lechner and the lawyers that are in the room.
Well, Dr. Sills, I'll go ahead and get that started for those of us with legal training. Here in Winston-Salem, we are looking at starting a right to counsel program. We've already secured funding for it. And so right now we're just ironing out exactly what that is going to look like. But we thought that it was extremely important to have a right to counsel program to somewhat level the playing field. You know, oftentimes landlords do have legal representation. Many of them will tell you, well, no, I'm just kind of like a mom and pops type of setup and so on. And I know that is true too. But also there are those who do have access to that legal representation. And most tenants simply do not, particularly those who are in situations already where they're having difficulty with paying rent and most likely utilities and everything else. And so the goal is just to somewhat, like I said, level that playing field and try to work with as many people as we can, which will be to the benefit of not only the tenants, but the landlord. And so we are partnering with legal aid here in Winston-Salem to go ahead and get that established. And we also are continuing with our eviction diversion mediation program that is also in partnership with legal aid and Wake Forest University School of Law, and of course, the city of Winston-Salem. So we do see value in the right to counsel program. We're really excited to get that rolled out. And we were really thrilled that the city council also agreed with the need to do so.
I would love to hear more about what is funding that in Winston, because I am right on your heels as it relates to that. And I'm really, really interested in kind of how you put that together and the structure of it. And I can catch up with you offline about that, but I just wanted to plug that that is a particular area of interest to neighborhood development.
No problem, Michelle.
Well, you know, obviously that is something that we at Legal Aid would really like to see happen and to see expanded. Before we started going over to the courthouse, we were representing the people who could find us. And that definitely was not everybody. We have been able to see what we can do just by being there. And it's not just us, it's not just legal aid, it's the combination of the services. It's having Renee there, it's having rental assistance there, and it's having the broader access to so many community partners who are willing to assist. We're trying to go even a step further than that by adding social work into this mix and assisting the tenants further with not just solving the immediate eviction crisis, but keeping them housed as well. We are very grateful, and we received funding from the United Way for this. It is great, but this is not, having enough lawyers to cover all of this is not a cheap proposition. The days we're over there, it takes at least at least one attorney for each session of court. And then we really need to have more. We have to have an attorney, we have to have a paralegal, and you really need somebody. You need somebody in the courtroom, and you need somebody kind of running around the halls, answering questions and running back and forth to rental assistance. So it's very intensive, but it's very thorough, and the good that we can do is really really incredible, I think. Some evictions are inevitable, they're going to happen, but not all of them are. Statewide, and I was really kind of shocked by this figure. I didn't realize that we were that successful, but about 85% of the cases in which legal aid provides representation in court to the tenant, we avoid the eviction. Now we want to go further than that, and we want to see, well, do these people stay housed? But the results are impressive, and providing legal representation into the mix is something that can really make a difference. It can make a difference in people's lives, not just in the short term, but in the long term, because eviction, once you get that eviction stain on your record, that is a long-term detriment to your housing going forward. It's a detriment to mental health. It's a detriment to financial health. And, we just want to do what we can to avoid that. And
well, Janet, sorry, it's Michelle. I was going to ask you a question. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's occurred to me and that we're really targeting from a neighborhood standpoint is, for example, neighborhood development lives in the Melvin Municipal Office Building, where no one ever comes unless they, need something pretty substantial, but it's hard to get to. It's difficult to access. So one of the goals that we have over the next few months is a relocation of neighborhood development services into the community. And in Greensboro, what that means is we are either moving to District 1 or to District 2 for our office space. And I would argue that legal aid would be a good partner to also kind of bring into that conversation or that mix to be housed in one of the highest impacted areas of our city. So it may be worth talking about in the same way. Think of the housing hub, right? There was a reason that those organizations were kind of married together and moved into that location where they are. The collective need to be in the community, not expecting that the community has information that they're often cut off from and knows where to come to find us. We've got to go to them, and we've got to really embed in those places, whether you're talking about legal aid or neighborhood development at the city or other partner organizations. So it'd be interesting to have a conversation about how we prop this up in the communities that are impacted most and will likely continue to be impacted most by these issues. So that's another, we can continue offline conversation, but I think is a really important piece of this, because if communities don't have the information as to the resources that they need, then we can have all the structured programs in the world that we want to have. But if folks don't know how to get to them, it's almost a worthless point.
Right.
That is, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say that's fantastic, Michelle, and I really, really do hope that we can continue that conversation. I think that's really interesting.
And I'm just saying, this is Sherry Neal from the county again. Wanda, yes, please keep me in the loop because I would like to have that discussion with you further about their programs. I think Stephen and I probably are already shaking our heads together. The other piece of it, and I'm so excited that you all have a social worker. One, I think you have to look at things in a holistic manner. And so having that social worker to, like you just said, it's not just, you're just dealing with the immediate crisis, but we got to look at this holistically because there are a lot of times other needs. And then to explain exactly what you said, when I went to court with you all a few weeks ago, exactly what you said, you need someone in the hall. So myself and my intern was literally doing that in the hallway. Like you said, we need someone that's skilled and knowledgeable that can kind of help facilitate. You know, I had an opportunity to talk to an attorney and kind of educate them. Just like you said, we need people interact because again, you all are trying to handle the cases inside the courtrooms. And we're also trying to run back and forth with the staff from the city of Greensboro and the county that are kind of trying to assist. You got Renee and her, team, they're trying to do the mediation. So it really isn't a collective group that has to happen there so that we can catch every individual that's there, as well as educate them. And then also those attorneys that may have just kind of walked out may not be knowledgeable about it, because we of course had an attorney that was there that I talked to. He called his client and the client showed up. And so they were agreed to go down to, ERAP with the lady there. And then we were able to resolve that issue. So it does have to, I agree, be a collective body. And again, talking about, as Michelle said, we have to engage all people here at the table. And we got to stop working in silos. We got to maximize our resources. And so if we could really work and pulling together as a community and really working together with the resources, because we have a lot of financial resources, but we have to work smart and not hard and collectively as a body about pulling things together so that we can be more successful and impactful here in our community as well.
And if I may jump in, I'd like to just give a shout out to our local group in Winston-Salem, our Eviction Diversion Network, because we do have, and I think Mia Stockton is on this call too from DSS, but I do know that they have had a table set up outside, right, Mia, in terms of trying to help people with ERAP assistance, to be, like you all are talking about, out there helping people to make sure they're aware. And then also over at Wake Forest School of Law, one of our EDN partners, Professor Allison Gold and her law students have been going out into the communities and actually assisting people on site, laptops in hand, making sure that they're assisting people to complete the ERAP applications and to have access to our educational packets that our EDN has assembled that contains that information that I mentioned earlier about community resources. Because again, oftentimes when people are facing eviction for non-payment of rent, they're going to have challenges in other areas, including utilities and food insecurity and so forth. So we have a pretty decently comprehensive list of community resources so that people know where to go for that ancillary supplemental help. And Mia, you all are still set up outside of the courtroom, right?
Absolutely, Wanda. The Forsyth County DSS staff, we are at the eviction court, which is located in the Government Center in Winston-Salem downtown. We are there Monday through Friday. Throughout the entire docket day, whatever's on the docket for that day, we're there that entire time. And then at the DSS, we are open Monday through Friday to assist tenants as well and landlords with the emergency rental assistance. And we have Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have evening hours up until 7 p.m. to assist any tenant that may need to complete an application. So we're doing that daily, and it's worked well. One of the things, we originally were inside the courtroom. The magistrate was in the larger courtroom and we were in the smaller one, but we're relocated on the outside for now. We're still working on efforts to get back inside the courtroom to streamline that process. But in addition to that, we also go to the clerk of court and gather some information about eviction. And so the DSS staff make telephone calls to those that are listed on the docket in advance to try to get them signed up with the emergency rental assistance.
See, Mia, I knew you could describe that far better than I ever could. So thank you so much for helping me out with that.
What Mia just described is one of the things that we have discussed here in Greensboro over and over again, and that is reaching the tenants or the parties in the eviction before they come to court. And that is the key to stopping the eviction, because once they get to my courtroom, it's almost too late. And even if we do have attorneys there and social workers there and mediators there, we can only pump the brakes so long to allow the both parties to speak with the attorney and the mediator and the social worker. So we would love for information to be sent out even when the complaint is filed, so that when the complaint and the summons is served by the sheriff on the defendant, they would have information available to them on services that they could receive, people that they could contact. But it's something that definitely needs to happen before it comes to court.
And
for it to be most effective. Yes.
Julie, here in Forsyth County, we have a relationship with our clerk of court, Denise Hines, and also with the Forsyth County Sheriff to get the information that I referenced earlier into the hands of tenants as quickly as we can. And so over at the clerk of court, we have a packet of information that not only includes that resource list, but it also includes a flow chart for where people can go, just to simplify it so that they know, okay, if I have a pending eviction issue, then we have a flow chart showing them what their options are and where they can go. And then if it's for other issues, it's the same thing. So we have that in addition to just general information about mediation, the free mediation services that are offered and so forth. And we have it in English and Spanish. And so we have been working in tandem with the Forsyth County Sheriff and also with our clerk of court, because we agree with you. It does need to go out as quickly as possible. And I know that our local Winston-Salem Regional Association of Realtors has also been very supportive and helpful in terms of saying that they would assist with getting information out to their tenants and their property managers as well.
I just want to add, we've been successful in reaching out to landlords in our area, so that there's one apartment complex in High Point that as soon as a tenant is late, they give that tenant my information so that they can call them. They get like a 30-day letter from the property manager. And part of that also says, reach out to this number for help with your rent. So that, like you said, we can get them before they're at court. And then, we're trying to increase the landlords. We have new landlords almost every day that all of a sudden they're referring their tenants. They say, you know what, if they don't pay by this date, we're going to be filing for eviction. But we're able to get the person in the Emergency Rental Assistance Program application, talk to the landlord to say, this is going to take some time. Please give us time. They may not be able to do it always because of their new ownership has them handcuffed, and they have to do what the owner says. But at least we're able to get them in the system. So when they come to court, at least they can say to the magistrate, okay, I've applied. This is what's going on with my application. And we're able to reach out to the county and the city to say, can you move this case forward as much as possible so that there's an approval? And I always tell people, show up at court. If you don't show up, you're guaranteed to lose.
And from DSS standpoint for Guilford County, I can say that when they come in with those 30-day notice to vacate, we do try to pull those as high as we can.
Yeah.
Our volume is just really high. So it's not that we're not pushing them, but we have to watch our volume. I mean, just this week, I've had 40+ evictions walk in day before court. So we do try to give them as much information as we possibly can. And we do try to provide them with letters, commitment letters to show up with court. And we push for the continuance just so that we can have time to process those through accounting. So it is that we are providing them. It's just sometimes it's when they decide to come in to tell us, or they've had a caseworker for a month and, you know, we're just rolling in the docs as they come. And then the next thing you know, they have an eviction. So it's from DSS Guilford County. We are trying to push them with as much information and arm them as much as we can with how we're going to help. But at the same time, when they do come in, it's usually too late, or there's just no working around it because they've waited for so long.
Thank you so much for, thank you so much for saying those words. They need to come to court. The outcome is significantly better when they come to court. And landlords are notorious for telling the tenant, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it, you don't need to come to court. That's not the case, especially on Tuesdays in Greensboro when we have our eviction resolution clinic available, which, by the way, my soapbox is I would love to have them every day of the week. Because the outcome is significantly better for all parties when they have legal representation. And just to put this into perspective, not only do I handle small claims court, I also handle administrative court, and which is criminal and traffic cases. And I appoint legal counsel. I appoint legal counsel for cases where the punishment would be 60 days, a maximum punishment would be 60 days or more. But in North Carolina, we don't have legal representation for people that are going to be homeless if they lose their case. And it's an eye-opener if you put it in those terms. So this court is extremely grateful for legal aid and UNCG for helping to reduce the number of evictions in court.
I think one of the things that we do is shift the whole narrative of how an eviction happens, because right now, and for I think a really long time, it's been the case that filing a case in court and getting the eviction and padlocking someone is the easiest, cheapest, fastest way to handle a landlord-tenant dispute. And I think that if we can shift that paradigm and we can have lawyers in court, which ideally one day is a guaranteed right to counsel in every housing case, but we'll start with at least expanding our clinic, maybe just even in Greensboro for now, to every session of court. We can make it such that it's not the easiest and fastest and best and maybe only way to handle a landlord-tenant dispute, because there are going to be counterclaims for conditions issues or counterclaims for unfair debt violations or other types of ways that litigation in every other type of case is expensive and timely and something everyone should try to avoid. And when we have a system where coming to court is able to resolve, divert cases, and just be something that one day is something that both landlords and tenants are trying to avoid totally, then it's almost like we can do what you all are saying and be more preventative about it. And I think that there's a way to be preventative by starting off with getting the cases in court, so that people eventually don't want to come to court and feel like it will be, that there are other options, there are better options, there are cheaper options. I know Stephen has done some really good work in investigating the cost to a landlord in evicting somebody, both the eviction process and then the turnover process. It's not financially beneficial to landlords to have high turnover in their rental properties. And so there is a benefit to them to continue to preserve tenancies. Obviously, there's an incredible benefit to tenants to preserve their tenancies. And there's a benefit to society as a whole, as we've been saying, all the costs that we all bear when there's housing instability.
I was just going to ditto what Magistrate Antonelli said. So when we talk about the eviction piece, all you do is throw it over to a different system, into the homeless system, right? And so it's all the same. And that's what we have to, I keep saying it, it's all the same system. And so we have to just really work on, and I think Wanda, not to say we're doing, I'm glad to see, and I really want us to all have a conversation for those of us that need to be at the table around elevating our process here in Guilford County, because the work can be done. We have the right people at the table. We have a lot of agencies that want to help, and we want to make some changes and really moving forward and working together in collaboration and not in isolation. And so I keep saying that because I think sometimes we all working towards the same goal, but everybody's having their own pieces and we're being separate about it. And we really have to work in collaboration, because that's what I hear. That's what you keep hearing. And that's the theme of everything. We have to work in collaboration. And I think it's a great idea to expand, maybe us putting that information out. I know we've tried to with the sheriff, but and looking at how we can get that in, like when they mail it out, just like you said, when it's getting mailed out, the information about coming to court, that's actually incorporated in there versus, like you said, waiting, because it's pretty much, you're kind of fighting at the end to try to hold things together. But again, talking about that preventive piece is the best way to kind of move forward. So I just have to keep dittoing that I will be calling a meeting soon for us all to come together, because it would be nice for us to have some more success stories that we've already had here in Guilford County.
Before we turn to our question stack and open up to the audience questions, I want to invite any municipal or county or court staff at other regions outside the triad who haven't had a chance to speak, to tell us about their ERAP experiences, their right to counsel efforts, or any other things related to eviction resolution and diversion. And we've got folks from a variety of cities across the state that are online. Does anyone want to speak to that? If not, I think our first question in the stack, I answered a little bit earlier, Fulton County, and if you're outside of one of the cities that have their own ERAP programs, or even if you're in one of those cities, you can go to the HOPE program at the state level, which will route you to a local resource if needed. If not, we'll take your case, do their intake immediately. And I dropped that link in the chat. I'll drop it again once more before we end up. Our next question was from Bob Powell. I understood that evictions were a problem before COVID. What are we going to do for the continuing problem? And I think we've spoken a little bit to that, but what are some of the efforts moving forward beyond the immediate issue of COVID-related evictions? Does anyone want to tackle that?
From the commission standpoint, we are putting together models such as what you all are engaged in Guilford County and Forsyth County of eviction diversion, eviction resolution programs, so that we can pitch those to other jurisdictions who may not know where to start, who may think it's generally a good idea. We've heard about this thing that's happening, but they don't know where to begin. And then we provide them with best practices and technical assistance and rulemaking if that needs to happen, and where they might find resources, and really give them the lift that they need to come together and adopt some of these models locally. So we're really building off of your work and sharing it around the state. So it's been a terrific help to not just folks where you are, but in other locales as well.
And I think the clinic, that the whole program that we're working on with legal aid and the city, the county, and the center, one of the things also for the long term is to have educational resources for people about, how to improve their economic situation, how to offset some of their rent expense by other programs that are available to reduce, say, their food budget, their clothing budget, their internet budget, their phone budget. I think that's important as a long-term goal too, and to make sure that, as Holly was saying, that they don't think of eviction as a quick, cheap, easy way to get someone out, but look at mediation and talking to their tenant.
I have a question from Brittany Cousins asking, as a landlord, frustrated with the backlog and the timetable, can you speak to the expected timetable, especially for getting the backlog of already approved or submitted applications and continuations of recertifications? I think this is both for the city, Michelle had to step off, but Cindy Blue is on still, and for the county, Sarah Baker.
So to answer that question, the volume is high. So for every person asking for help, to one caseworker is about 100 right now. And the number I have is low of workers. And then it's got to run through a process. As of right now, we're averaging about 30 to 45 days. Each situation's different, so I can't say that in 45 days from the day you checked in with us that it's going to be there. But it's just the volume right now, and that's the only answer I can give, is the volume is high, the help is low, but we are doing our best to try to get them out within a 30 to 45 day processing time.
Cindy, thanks.
Yep. Thanks. The county was kind enough to share $10 million of their ERA program funds with the city. Those agreements went through the county commissioner's approval as well as the city council approval. And subsequent to the city council approval, we had council approve the awards to the agency. So right now we're contracting for those funds, and funds should be flowing very quickly coming out from the city for those that were sitting in a backlog status that are approved, just waiting on payment.
I think Brittany in the chat has said some of hers are over 90 days. Should she contact someone directly regarding those specific cases, or?
Yeah, if she wants to contact us here at the office, we can take a look at where they are and if they are sitting in an approval status, just waiting on the funds to arrive at the agency to be paid.
With that, she'll want to check which program so if she did the city or if she did CARES, that's going to tell you which person to contact. And again, you can contact Guilford County at the 3000 number.
This is another thing that we've been doing as part of our courthouse clinic, is we tell some people who don't have court that day, if you come to the courthouse on Tuesdays around like 10:30 in the morning, it's kind of after the 9 a.m. docket. There are representatives from both the city and county who are there with information about every rental assistance application. They can pull up the application. They can tell either a landlord or tenant what's needed. They can expedite if necessary. They can find people who have fallen through the cracks. Obviously, I'm saying this, realizing that I'm probably totally overwhelming them and that project, which is only just another way of saying it would be so helpful to be able to do this every day of the week. But for now, that's really been working for a lot of people, and we've been able to get a lot of assistance applications moving.
And I'd just like to add again, I know we all have said this, but you know, we're all at staffing and capacity issues. And so just Sarah said, and Cindy has already inferred that there are lots of applications in the pipeline, not just from the county end, but from the city end. You have some that are sitting, they're approved and just need to be paid. But, you know, you have people, and then, you know, of course, we do have people applying to both systems sometimes, which complicates things. And then, you know, with us, we're having to verify, you know, we have to verify that they're not in one system or the other and vice versa. And so keep that in mind as we're kind of educating our community about that. Capacity is the issue, because it's not like it's one portal of entry where people are getting application. There's a lot of portal of entries, including you being able to come into the office as well. So really encourage clients to not wait until the last minute as we're going through those types of pieces. We are working on the expansion of our capacity issues, but of course, you know, with everything, nothing gets resolved overnight. So, but we are working on that so that we can speed up and expedite, the application processing. And so, and we would love to have someone there, you know, from all 4 days. However, that does take someone out of being available to process. And so want to look at that long-term as well. But that's just another piece to kind of keep in mind as people are moving forward.
This next question comes from Adolfo Briseño, City of Winston. Can the federal government use the millions or billions a year that it uses to pay subsidized rent to build houses for the poor, thus relieving some of the pressure? If the houses are given away to poor, evictions will not be an issue. Do any of the panelists believe that this is a feasible idea? And I think this could also be answered by some of City of Greensboro Neighborhood Development and others who work with HUD funds for construction projects. Cindy, not to put you on the spot again, I know this is kind of up your alley in terms of development. What HUD resources are there currently for building more?
There are additional resources that are coming down the pipe. There is money that has been awarded to Greensboro for the production of supportive housing units, and that money is going to be coming online next year. HUD and the federal government are also working on ways to increase funding into the National Housing Trust Fund program, which will also be directing dollars down through states that targets households that are earning less than 50% of the area median income. So I think that conditions across the country and advocacy across the country are beginning to show results at the federal level in terms of the additional attention that is being paid to housing and the additional funding that is starting to come through.
Thank you so much. Antonia Monk-Richburg asks, can we do anything locally to limit the rental increases? Can we impose any kind of rent controls? Jennifer, is that something that you see from the state level that's possible?
In short, no. I don't see the political will there to impose any kind of rent controls. Obviously, that's something that could be contemplated locally, as has been done. We've seen that example in a number of other places, including New York City, which notably also has a right to counsel and has seen great success with that program there. And, you know, on a related note on the right to counsel piece, again, politically, I think that it is very challenging. If you ask our folks on the criminal justice side of things, they're going to tell you that while there is a right to counsel, it's woefully underfunded. And the idea of adding to that is very challenging. However, I still think that there are a number of opportunities, particularly in this moment, to consider more full representation without a legal right to counsel. And that is, of course, what you are already exploring with Legal Aid of North Carolina in the clinic model there, and working with law schools and others. And so there's a lot of opportunity there to provide full representation without granting a legal right and the attached price tag to it.
I think Susan Farr's question is kind of a follow-up on that. What needs to change at the state level that's currently preventing cities from making some of the changes that would be the biggest impacts locally? What state enabling legislature needs to happen to allow us more latitude at the municipal or county level to engage in creative solutions to housing problems?
The only state, I guess, mandated, actually it's a state law that I can think of that affects everyone would be the timing. For evictions, the timing is significantly less than for any other process that is filed in a civil court. So for eviction, you could file, as a landlord, you could file on the 1st of the month, have your case heard on the 8th of the month, 7 days, and then if a judgment is entered, the defendant, I'm sorry, my colleague just hit print and my printer is a little bit loud. If the judgment was entered, the defendant would have 10 days to appeal. So that now we're looking at the 18th of the month. And then on the 19th, the landlord would have a right to file a writ. So that could be served anytime in the next few days. So in less than 25 days, a defendant or a tenant could be evicted. So timing wise, that's one option that could be changed. Unlike small claims court, when you hear money owed cases, there's the process that has to be served. The sheriff has much longer to serve those, like up to 3 weeks than, or the case is filed in 3 weeks than with summary ejectments. The notice is only 2 days before court. So that's the only thing that I can think of. Somebody else may chime in here, but that's the only thing I can think of that affects us on a local level.
And I would offer that there could be something, I would agree with Magistrate Antonelli. I think the timing of this is particularly awful in North Carolina for tenants because of that rocket docket that she's already outlined for us. But it is that we do have the example from other types of cases in North Carolina and in other states where mandatory mediation or some other diversionary program to try to resolve the case before it goes on to full judgment could be an intermediate step. So it wouldn't get you to the right to counsel, but it would get you to a cooling off period, slowing down the process a little bit, seeing if there could be some resolution without a full eviction that would then stay on the tenant's record. And so that is something that I think that we could, that could definitely be done locally, but certainly we may want to consider as a statewide policy.
That is what Magistrate Antonelli just said. That's the shocking part, how quickly people, they may not know about that hearing until 2 days before it occurs. And these people are working and already in economic bad straits. And they're like, I can't, if I take off to go to court, I could lose my job, you know, and if something could be changed about that, that would help a lot. And I will say that when I did mediation in Maryland, it was at the district court, and part of the judge would say, you know, particular cases, go and talk to Ms. Norris, she's the mediator that's here today to try to resolve the issue, so that it, you know, was more of, you know, more chances for people to resolve it without the eviction actually proceeding in the case. And when the way they started it to try to help out was having pro bono attorneys, which I was one, who would volunteer to come in and spend like an afternoon to do the mediation. But if we could change the timing that landlords, how quickly the landlords could file a complaint, that would make a big difference, I think.
Thank you. Let's open things up for anyone in the audience to pose a question. Carolyn, I saw you go off mute. Did you want to ask something? Bruce, you've always got questions.
Yeah, I got a question. It's a comment, it's a follow-up on Adolfo's question about can we get the federal government to invest in housing? It's a comment too on the issue of political will. All this whole last hour and a half, we've been talking about something needs to change, and we agree that change needs to be systemic. And I think we need to start talking more specifically about what those changes would be and how much political will would have to change in order to make them start to seem feasible. I'll just point out that the Build Back Better law that's now being hashed out in Washington, it started out with $313 billion of housing funding, which is a lot, is now down to probably about 150 billion. And it also included a repeal of the Faircloth Amendment, which prohibited, any net increase in public housing, the number of public housing units. But that bill has not, to this day, included any provision for building new public housing units. Lots for repair and rehabilitation, which is great, but no new expansion of public housing. And so my long-winded question to the group is, can we put significant public investments in housing, a return to the post-war commitment to public housing? Can we take that up as a serious systemic change? And if we did that, could we contemplate the abolition of eviction?
I think ultimately the answer is home ownership. And I really appreciate Sophia Crisp over at Housing Consultants Group, who talks about what steps are necessary to eventually get there one day. Because if we continue to fund systems which really just incentivize wealthy, mostly wealthy white people to buy, investors to buy up a bunch of places and then rent them to poor people of color through this public benefit system, it's not working. I mean, it's that system in and of itself it just perpetuates the same types of oppression. And so I know in the sort of town hall that happened a few weeks ago, one of the speakers talked about some of the steps that it would take to increase home ownership for people of color in their own communities, in communities where gentrification is happening and houses are being bought up by investors and then re-rented back to people in the community. And I can't do as good a job as that speaker did about talking about what those steps were, but and Stephen, perhaps you remember some of them too. One of the things I thought that was really brilliant and impactful was when a house goes for sale, there being a period of time before it gets advertised widely. So there being like a month where it is only the people within a mile radius of that home that have the opportunity to put a bid in. And what that would do is strengthen communities, strengthen homeownership within communities, and not allow for investors from other cities, other communities, other states, other countries to just outbid everybody else and swoop up and, you know, create another investment property where they're not going to take good care of it because they don't live in it and they don't care who lives in it. And it's really just about money. And I know there were a lot of other really good ideas that that speaker had, and Stephen, maybe you can kind of help me articulate them, but ultimately that's the answer.
I just dropped that panel, both the first and second panel. The panel that Holly's referencing is the YouTube link that I just dropped in the chat. This first right to refusal to people who live within a neighborhood to build more community cohesion and pride in the community, even when it's a rental property, is a strong argument that's been made as a way to create anti-gentrification, but still have development and improvements to a community being made. And I think that was Kim, she's on your committee from A&T.
Kim Cameron.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Did anybody else want to tackle Bruce's question? I think we had another one in the chat as well. Norwood, did you want to answer your question, ask your question? I'll read the question off. S. Norwood asks, what steps should nonprofits take to support community members due to limitations in exhausted funds or resources related to housing and rental assistance? As well, what other resources exist outside of ERAP and the COC? What is there for nonprofits to connect their tenants to, their clients to?
That is a real issue for nonprofits because the funding is just not there to meet the need that exists in our community. And I know so many nonprofits do as much as they can with getting donations and seeking grants, et cetera, to have funds that they can freely give out to people in need. But oftentimes, you know, I think we all try to share when each other has a fund that's, you know, they can provide direct assistance. But because of the need, we also have limits on the dollar amounts. And there are people who, you know, as we see in court, thousands of dollars that they owe in rent. They can owe more than $1,000 in utility bills because it's been over a year since the coronavirus impacted us. And people have not all recovered from the job loss, or if they have a new job, they're not making as much, or it's part-time, or it comes and it goes as we shut down and reopen. So I just don't know what to say. All the nonprofits, you're doing all the best you can to make sure you share information, let each other know when you might have resources available to help people.
Yeah, I think we talked about the need for information about the eviction process, to make tenants aware of what their rights are, to make them aware that legal aid is available. You know, I think just other nonprofits, to me, spreading information to the people they serve is what would be helpful to address this crisis that we're facing. And I know Magistrate Antonelli told us it's a trickle. When you're right there, it's a fire hose. So.
Well, let's go around and give everybody just a minute to close. Any last comments from each of our panelists? Wanda and Michelle both had to step off. Magistrate Antonelli, any closing remarks?
Excuse me.
Yes, sorry.
Hey, just to follow up on the question that was just asked from us, we have been seeing an increase on customers coming in needing assistance with not just ERAP, but also the COC process and coordinate entry. And we've just been trying to help them as much as possible. And we're just really wondering, like, how can we better support them as much as possible without it seeming like, oh, we can't help you today due to everything that's going on with the pandemic, you know?
I think that's something that the Center for Housing Community Studies might be able to assist with. Stephanie Ledwell is on as our housing navigator. Her role really is to figure out which resource in the community fits which person and can work with the nonprofits as well as individual clients. Stephanie, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've been developing a resource list. I think it is, as you point out, it's really important when people are coming to us for help that they don't reach a brick wall. Even especially, you know, just to their state of mind, because they're in such a desperate situation. So, you know, when we can refer them around, when we can especially do a warm handoff. So we can give a call and say, hey, I've got this client. I know that your organization does A, B, and C. Can I send them over? This is their situation, you know, and that warm handoff not only you know, can help the client just to feel like there are people who care and they're not out in this sort of wilderness of, sure, there's programs out there that can help you, but what are they? How do I find them? And also, you know, I mean, we've got our programs we want to get the clients for. And so I think, you know, we can all work together that way. And also, I did want to just mention, I stepped in late and I'm sorry I had an event. But going back to just touching on what some people were talking about, especially Holly, and of course we had the comments from Brittany Cousins, you know, landlords are an important component of this whole equation. And it's often, from our point of view, a situation where we feel in juxtaposition to them. They are doing the opposite of what we're doing. They're trying to kick the people out and we're trying to you know, keep them where they're living. But having worked as a property manager before, and then also during my rapid rehousing work in Orange County, we did a lot of landlord outreach. And what we continuously heard was that landlords, first of all, they don't get into being landlords to kick people out. They want to have people living there. They just want their money because they say, oh, well, I can't run this as a charity. I mean, some people obviously are very accommodating and you know, bless them, but many landlords feel like, oh, well, they expect us to just go without our money and this is my business, when, you know, part of the landlord outreach component is obviously educating them about our programs and how we can meet those needs that they have as well as the needs of the clients. But also, you know, what I often heard was things like, and I'm sure any of us who've worked with housing departments or any sort of government agency, things can take a lot of time. There are rules and regulations that, you know, landlords may find onerous, and maybe for different reasons. Sometimes, you know, we feel like maybe they shouldn't find those onerous, but regardless, they're saying, oh, well, they make us make all these repairs, or they take a long time to process, or things like that. So I think part of it is just maybe including them in the conversation. So I'm recognizing the fact that it's easy for us to, just like in the political conversation, you know, we have our very firmly held beliefs and we see our clients every day and we feel for them and we empathize and we want to advocate for them. But just to recognize that there might be something we can do to bring those landlords you know, sort of into the fold, into, you know, what we're doing, just like the work that Renee has done and some of the landlord outreach we've already done has borne fruit. And, you know, in the end, they want their money. We, you know, hopefully usually have the money to give them, us, our agencies, and just to maybe let them have their voices heard in this milieu, rather than it being sort of an us against them thing. It may produce some really good results. I've definitely seen happen at times. So I'd really love to see that become more of a part of the conversation.
I just wanted to add that the county and the city of Greensboro is currently working on an electronic resource guide. And so the goal is to have it done in the first part of the year so that we can, it's a great need for us to do that. And then we're going to work also with the city of High Point to do the same thing, because there is a need, just like we've all just talked about, that, you know, when you're in the community, you have to know what the resources are so you can link people. And when people are coming to your agencies, you know, they're not only coming for the purpose of, like you said, an eviction or needing money just for rent, they need some other things as well. And so we as providers, I think we have a duty and responsibility to the community to make sure they shouldn't have to go to 10 agencies to know that one agency they come to should be able to link them to the resource. So like as Stephanie says, doing a warm transition, a warm handoff to say, hey, although we may not offer that here at our agency, I do have an agency we can contact and help you link them to the service. And I think that's just a responsibility that we should have for our community, so people don't have to get frustrated with the systematic issues that we may have and put in place, because they're already stressed at a level that, you know, some of us can't even understand. And so now you're asking me to do one more thing again, instead of us looking at this as a wraparound opportunity, as we call it, social work wraparound services, that we are engaging the client and then we link them to appropriate resources. So I just want to put that out there just as an option so that you know that that is coming, and we are working hard on trying to get that done at the first part of January 2022.
Sherry, I just dropped in the chat, highpointresources.org is a list that was put together with Resilience High Point for just that purpose. And so it's got a lot of Guilford County and High Point specific resources. So you might want to connect with them on that. We are at time. I appreciate all 65 who've stuck out. We had 97 at the peak, quite a well-attended event. Erica, do you have 1 minute to give us a highlight of the next hangout?
I surely can. So get ready, folks, for our December the 3rd housing hangout. It's going to be a topic that's looking at housing policies and how can equitable housing policies also be a strategy towards reducing violence in our communities. So we'll have a series, a guest panelists that will be talking on these points and thinking about strategies both at the national and the local level that we can implement to addressing both housing issues, but also violence as well.
Thank you so much.
Figure out if he's gay or not.
And I've got, I will have a link up to that Eventbrite later this afternoon, go.uncg.edu/housing hangouts. You'll also get emails as folks who've registered for previous events. Appreciate everyone for coming out, for attending this really informative session. I want to thank our panelists, Wanda Allen-Abraha, Julie Antonelli, Sarah Baker, Michelle Kennedy, Jennifer Lechner, Janet McCauley-Blue, Renee Norris, and Holly Owner, all who have given us some great insight into the work that's going on around eviction diversion, eviction resolution, mediation, and all things emergency rental assistance. We'll see you again in 1 month. Thank you all. Bye-bye.